Glass is a strange medium to work with.
It's like a world on the end of a blowing arrow. It's beautiful.
It looks like if you're looking into a secret world and you're seeing a background, you know, like a treasure.
Glass has been part of our world for some 6,000 years. The Romans used it, making the first windows. Fragments of panes some 2 centimeters thick have been found in the ruins of Pompeii. The first bottles appeared around 1300, when glass workers had the added stress of knowing that if they revealed any of their special formulas, they might pay for the indiscretion with their lives. In the 16th century, the material still had the same elevated status. Window panes were so expensive that when the lord of the chateau was away, servants used to take them out and put them in storage in case they got broken. Through all the years, the fascination which this unique substance holds has continued. Working and shaping it still carries a mystique that links today's glassmakers with those of 16th century Venice or 19th century France. But this is Scotland, on the edge of the 21st century. And these are the makers of Caithness Glass. Despite the fact that glass is manufactured from a variety of raw ingredients, it's seen as a pure natural substance, far removed from the qualities of the synthetic materials that try to emulate it. Right from the beginnings, in their first factory in Wick, Caithness Glass enhanced that close natural connection by working to give their products a look which was characteristic of the very special countryside which surrounded them. This is the Wick factory today, but the story began in a much smaller factory in 1961. The original designs were conceived along the same lines as the well-established Scandinavian styles, but by creating vases and bowls touched with the colours of heather, peat and lochs, the unique identity of Caithness Glass was quickly assured. The innovative impulse continued through the 60s, producing artefacts that were clear departures from traditional glass designs. The range gradually expanded, and the markets kept on responding to the initiatives with enthusiasm. In 1968, the company's preeminence was acknowledged in the granting of a royal warrant by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. Caithness Glass was obviously by now a major player in the whole area of glassmaking. It was time to set up its own engraving studio. It was a move that led to some rather surprising and certainly unforeseen developments. In the same year, 1969, a new factory was opened in Oban on the west coast. It was a response to the continuing demand for the company's products, and originally it produced artware, especially the type known as Obanware, with its distinctive coloured stripes floating inside the glass. A year later, another avenue was opened with the launching of Caithness Jewelry, which began producing miniature paperweights set in hallmarked silver. By 1974, the company was 13 years old and had been producing paperweights for only 5 years. But interest in their designs was now worldwide. 2 factories were no longer enough to meet the market's needs, and in 1979, the company expanded further, opening another factory, this time in Perth. Every decade has continued to add to the momentum established in those early days in the one small factory up in Wick. The success of each generation of paperweights has been relentless. It's meant that more and more manufacturing space has had to be found to satisfy the growing demand. In 1992, new factories and visitors' centres were opened in both Oban and Wick. And 1994 is a very special date, marking the silver jubilee of that very first set of Caithness paperweights. As in all industries, the years have brought more mechanization, new processes and techniques. But there's no machine anywhere that can make the objects that are being created here. In this case, there's no substitute for the artistic skills of the designers and the makers. Colin Terrace is in no doubt as to the primary ingredient in the company's success.
The secret of this whole operation is people. We have a lot of things going for us. We have a young workforce who do not think as the old twinkling-eyed craftsmen used to do. They kept everything to themselves, they wouldn't pass anything on. In the old days, you would say to somebody, right, I want to try this, I want to get this effect, and they would say, no, can't be done. We don't have that attitude. Our glassmakers don't have that attitude because they've got such a great tradition now, 25 years of all these fantastic effects behind them.
So what actually goes on here? How do these people make such desirable objects? What are the elements and processes involved? The raw materials represent an international mix. Sand from Scotland, colors from Germany, sodium nitrate from South America, sodium carbonate from Europe. In an ordinary working day, the makers will take something like 1,000 kilos of glass from the pots in the furnaces. It's the job of the duty furnaceman to make sure that there's always enough to meet their needs. When they've all gone home, he starts his night's work. First of all, he has to turn up the furnaces, ready to melt the next batch of raw materials. It takes about 2 hours for the furnace to reach 1400 degrees centigrade. That's the temperature that's needed to make sure that the melt is effective. 2 hours later, it's topped up again, and the melting continues into the night. By 4:30 a.m., the pots have all been topped up, and the furnaces now have to be turned down to cool slowly. By the time the glassmakers arrive, the molten glass will be between 1150 and 1190 degrees. The glass which the makers work with must be free of all impurities. Fragments of clay or dirt could ruin a whole batch, and so the pots which contain it mustn't crack or crumble. They're handmade out of special clay, which is formulated to withstand up to 1500 degrees. Heating, firing and setting a new pot needs precise skills and an ability to work in up to 1100 degrees of radiant heat. And in the end, all the care and all the preparations are designed to complement the skill of the makers. They're creating swirls, patterns and combinations that they won't actually see until the following day, when the weights have cooled off. To the untrained eye, the orange and black blob on the end of their blowing iron looks like just that. But it could be anything from the most complex of limited editions to the simplest design. It's the precision and artistry of the makers that controls its gradual evolution. The various stages of the process combine to produce complexity. but they're easy enough to recognize. Basically, each weight is built up of a series of layers. Before starting, production needs are translated into measured amounts of colored glass chips, powders, rods, and all the other substances which will be used for that day's batch of paperweights. Everything's now ready for the first gather of glass. The gather has to be accurate. If it's too fast, bubbles may form. If it's too slow, the heat will be unbearable. With exactly the right amount of glass gathered, it's next palleted into shape. Depending on the design, colors or other layers are picked up and taken to what's called the glory hole to be melted into the original gather. Another gather surrounds the first with a sort of envelope of clear glass. The weights then blocked and smoothed, and finally separated from the iron, ready to be sent to the annealing kiln, where it'll be cooled down over a period of some 14 hours. Weights with a regular pattern of bubbles like this seem to provoke most questions. The way they're made again shows what an accommodating material molten glass actually is. The inside wall of this mould has a raised regular pattern on it. By lowering a gather into it, the glass has lots of little hollows forced into it. When the next gather is taken, these hollows don't get filled, but simply remain as bubbles. It looks simple enough, but if the temperature isn't right, pieces of glass can stick to the mould. That means taking it apart and laboriously chipping it all off. Once again, success depends on the skill of the maker. There are 10 grades, and it takes some 7 or 8 years to get to level 10. But whatever level they're at, they're making one of the Caithness designs. The number of weights produced in the course of a day by any individual can be affected by many things, but it's mainly dependent on his or her skill and just how difficult the design is. With some of the less complicated examples, makers can produce well over 80. But when it comes to the limited editions, the processes involved are much more time-consuming, and the discard rate is much higher. After her visit to the Perth Glasshouse, Ursula Schiefer, the secretary of the Swiss Collectors Club, wrote that the hall where the makers work was a hell-like birthplace for heavenly creations. It's an apt description, with 4 furnaces, each carrying molten glass held at a temperature around 1190 degrees centigrade. White heat, threads of molten glass, noise, sweat, busyness, all of these make up the inferno that's needed to produce the cool beauty of the typical Caithness paperweight. So, what's it like working here?
Hot most days, but you do get used to it to a certain extent, although you'll always sweat. It's not glamorous.
The sound's not too bad, the noise and that, like, it's just the heat. It's just the heat. That's 9 years I've been here and I'm still sweating yet.
Hot. It's not else you can say about it, it's hot. Well, I'm not one of the best of people for taking up the heat anyway. I like to stay in the shade.
I have the best seat in the factory, although in the winter time I freeze to death. The big door's open at the bottom for air for everyone else, and I get the icy blast in. So I'm toasting at one side and freezing on the other.
You can't walk up the factory in a straight line. You've got to dodge irons. People coming out of glory holes. It's very hot glass.
And if it does get too bad, all you've got to do is lift your eyes and look out the window and you see somebody watching and you're fascinated, and it makes it worthwhile watching their faces.
The new weights come out twice a year, and then you get trained up on them.
I can still remember the first time I saw a paperweight being made. You know, I was just entranced by it, because it's so different from anything else.
We've got the glass exhibition every year, and we put our own designs in. And this year, one of my designs actually went through. It's great to have a paperweight that everybody's going to buy that's got your name on it.
The swirls and bubbles of the modern designs are very different from the miniature worlds inside the more traditional ones. Creating these tiny objects in precise patterns needs special techniques that are part of glassmaking history. The miniature glass sculptures inside these weights are the result of another traditional technique called lampworking. It involves heating and shaping rods and filaments of glass. In this case, the flat rods will become the petals of a flower. First, the petal shape is created, leaving excess glass at each end of it. One end is then heated and pulled off. Thin lines of colour are added to provide the detail in the petal design. The centre of the flower itself is set on a rod, and the petals are added one by one. As before, the final petal shape is created by pulling away the excess glass. The butterflies and leaves of this design are created using the same technique. They're then placed upside down on separate plates and taken into the glasshouse. There a sleeve is placed over them to form an enclosed mould. Glass is gathered and lowered into the mould to pick up first the flower. This is heated in the glory hole, and another thin layer of clear glass is added to provide a space between the flower and the butterfly which will hover above it. The iron is marked to make sure that the design is correctly orientated, and the butterfly is picked up melted in and then enclosed in a final gather of glass. And this is the result. Whatever style of weight is being made, they all have to be cooled very gradually in a controlled environment to prevent cracking or distortions. This happens in the annealing kilns. It's the process that turns the orange and black blob into something that looks more like the paperweights we know. But before it can leave the factory, there's still more work to be done on it. Some types need faceting. And all have their bases ground on a diamond wheel. Are polished, cleaned and inspected to make sure they pass the stringent quality controls. If they don't pass muster, nothing's left to chance. Caithness Glass are too proud of their reputation to risk letting any flawed weights find their way out of the factory. So the limited edition rejects are comprehensively destroyed by having molten glass straight from the furnace poured over them. And from all the heat, the noise, the bustle, come objects like this.
I start maybe with an idea, put it down on paper, discuss with maybe Franco or some of the glass people to find out what colours are actually available, and then experiment with how one colour maybe looks on top of another to get a third maybe completely different colour.
Time doesn't stop. Everything in life is in a state of flux, each of its strands made up of sequences of moments, chasing one another away. Waves break. Branches and grasses wave in the wind. Plants grow. Perhaps one of the attractions of the works of art produced by the designers and makers of Caithness Glass is that somehow they seem to catch the instantaneous, trap a transitional moment and suspend it, but in such a way that it still expresses the movement, the blending and mixing of things, the ongoing processes of living. It's a bewildering correspondence of the static and the dynamic. These are no longer simply things that stop paper blowing about. They're dreams caught in crystal.